And so to our lead commentator, and as you know, this is the point in the show that we bring him in to give his perspective on nearly everything we've covered on the program and beyond. And today I'm joined in the studio by the public affairs commentator, Arise News analyst and head of mass communications at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. How are you?
Thank you. I'm fine, thank you.
Nice to see you.
It's a pleasure.
You heard, obviously, Professor Usman Yusuf there. Very frank, very forthright.
As usual.
As I said, lavishly articulate. What did you make of the big points? I mean, he talks quite a lot and quite emotionally about the interview that President Buhari gave the Hausa television service. Right. He was very critical, but then he is in an opposing party and is a supporter of Atiku, so he would say that, wouldn't he?
That's right. You know, but I think Prof is usually very forthright, like you said, very voluble, very trenchant, and of course sometimes constructive, but sometimes when he wants to talk from the prism of his own political party, you can find him be overtly subjective, which is understandable. But it doesn't detract from the fact that he made his point very clear, and some of those points are very germane, like the one on corruption.
Absolutely.
I would have expected that a lot more would have been done with corruption, because corruption, I mean, it's a no-brainer that it's systemic, it is deep-seated, and it's still with us. You know, it has been with us from the 60s, you know, from the time of Cardinal Nzegu's 10% up to this point. Governments in and out have always been saying they're going to fight it, but to what extent have they been able to fight it, you know? And of course, it tells me that there's something much more fundamental about the problem of corruption. It just means that we're probably living a lie as a people. Living a lie in the sense that you look at the average civil servant, maybe the highest, most senior civil servant in this country probably earns about 500,000. And of course, if you look at that 500,000, what can it do with 500,000?
Yeah.
You know,
very little.
Faced with inflation, and this civil servant, you know, has the power, you know, to vet multi-billion naira contracts. You know, the temptation is there for him, you know, to think of helping himself, faced with meager resources, you know, and a volume and avalanche of responsibilities. You know, there's a deep-seated contradiction in between. So what do we do in this circumstance? You know, maybe we should be concerned about growing the economy. And one aspirant said about 4 years ago that we shouldn't be bothered about corruption. We should rather be bothered about growing the economy such that, you know, production can be boosted. Production will trigger multipliers, and with the face of multipliers, there will be consumption. And if there's consumption, of course, you know, the GDP can grow.
Yes.
Then we can have enough resources to reward people, you know, so that
and
it will
also
not
reduce
just be
the pressure on those people.
On
because
those,
in many cases, it's a lot of relatives and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and you know, reduce the pressure on them. They'll be able to take home. They will have living wages, not necessarily take-home pay that will probably take them nowhere.
Yes.
And that's why you see individuals. We have said it time and time again, Charles, that individuals in this country have become institutions rather than helping to grow the institutions that will help the majority of the people. These individuals face this pressure from the community of people around them, because the community of people have been failed by the institutions of the state.
And have been impoverished, basically.
They've been impoverished. In other climes, for instance, you won't see this happens where there are social safeguards, there are social security systems. Social safeguards are very arithmetic in terms of tendering to the needs and aspirations of the people, so that people don't even have a need to steal. But here, there's so much need, you know, to pilfer, you know, to steal, because, and they will explain to you, they will justify this for you, and that's why it has continued. Time in and time out, people complain about corruption. By the time they have their own opportunity, you see them repeating, continuing.
And also because they don't know, they can't predict tomorrow, because, I mean, in many cases, people are owed many months' salary. Even the little that they get, they don't actually get paid.
I think it's still part of the failure of the system, the failure of the institution. There must be a reason why salaries are being owed. It could be because the payer probably does not have enough, or there's something fishy going on somewhere.
Or they've diverted it for something else they consider to be a bigger priority.
Absolutely, but however it is trite in wisdom that a laborer deserves his wage. It's even a sin, but sometimes criminal for you not to pay. It is criminal. Yeah, in some clients for you not to pay somebody who has worked for 30
but just
days.
to make the point, though, that Professor Usman Yusuf, although he was as robust as you in his condemnation of corruption, it's important to note that the context in which he talked about his own experience was monies being moved from his agency without his consent, rather than it being necessarily embezzled. You see what I mean?
Yeah, but that was quite revealing, really, and it was some kind of chilling revelation. And it tells me that there are so many things that go on in government, that go on in government that we're not aware of, and they will probably may never be aware of, except when maybe through the instrumentality of EFCC or ICPC or the police, when we have this intermittent sensational reports, then the whole populace will now be aghast. Oh, this kind of thing can happen in this place. And that's why when we see each of those occurrences, each of those reportage, we just see it as an epitome of what has been happening and what will probably continue to happen. And again, it just beggars believe why nothing has been done to nip these things in the bud. And it takes us to the argument again around the need to be more preventive rather than rather than what do you call it now? Rather than thinking of prosecution and sanctioning, rather than apprehension, prosecution and sanctioning. Prevention is actually very, very much more important, because if the circumstances are there, for corruption to thrive, the temptation is also there. You still see it happening, considering the weakness of the human being.
Right. So the best way to do it is to prevent them.
Like
but that's why they had that single treasury account, isn't it?
Yeah, but
I mean, that was the whole idea, for money to be put into that place.
Maybe it's not.
And they wouldn't have multiple accounts, and people would have access to.
Very unfortunately, maybe it's not preventive enough. And again, it could probably remind us of how it could be. How we are so determined to circumvent processes just to pervert otherwise salutary processes, meant to prevent some of these dangerous occurrences from happening. It's just very unfortunate. But again, I don't think that we can continue forever to be emotional or sentimental about it.
That's why there's got to be some...
there has to be action, there has to be action. And that action has to revolve around, a brave, courageous leadership that has the political will to take on these issues.
Absolutely.
If we continue to have leaders that will be concerned about prerogative, compensation, and patronage, then there won't be any change. We'll continue along the inadequate or the pitiable line that we have always had.
There's a lot of hope being placed on 2023, but of course it depends on who wins. But in that context of 2023, the other thing he talked about a little bit was the issues around the PDP, the reaction of the Benue State governor, where he talks about he wouldn't have a Fulani man and so on, as president, and his personal reaction to it. But the key point here, which I tried to get him to focus on, and which I would like to get your considered analysis, is whether or not, given those kinds of things, we are likely to see more ethnic squabbles as we get closer to the election, and whether the whole question of election integrity is going to be compromised by that whole sort of ethnicity.
No, I don't think it will degenerate to that level where we'll begin to vote on the basis of ethnicity. Ethnicity remains, no doubt.
But it's the politicians who exploit that, isn't it? I mean, if Peter Obi or Tinubu or Kwangozo feels like he's got a big constituency. I mean, we heard Atiku Abubakar himself say during the Arewa sort of forum that you should, although he said he was misconstrued or misunderstood.
Even Governor Thomas apologized. I read that I read it just before this program that he apologized.
But the point is that it has an impact when you say things.
It does. In a multi-ethnic system, once in a while you will see these bus stops, but it doesn't hold water, and I don't expect it to hold water because the political line is thinner than the economic line. There are so many things that bind us together beyond politics. So many things in terms of economics, in terms of how we have been constructed, how our sociology has been constructed over the years. Some of these things are still stronger than our politics, and the politics can sometimes be very partisan, such that they can be very weak. People will come and make pronouncements, some of them very provocative. But the larger majority of people are not likely to go with those sentiments that they probably want us to do. I mean, we have seen it happening. We saw it in the 90s, in the Abiola Tofa campaign, but we saw how Abiola won, We saw it in the Obasanjo and other elections, and we saw Obasanjo won across the country. Even his own people probably didn't want him to emerge as president. They preferred Falai to him. But he won still. And of course, Jonathan. And of course, eventually we had President Yar'Adua, we had President Muhammadu Buhari. These people won across the country. So we will have some of this tension, contention, coming in the build-up to election, but I don't see anybody pandering to ethnic sentiment, overriding the rest of the population. They rather want to vote or rather want to select their leader on the basis of quality and competence and acceptability. Acceptability, whether rightly or wrongly, I think will matter more, and the way in which the leaders, the supposed leaders, the direction they are able to shape them into will also matter. Not this pandering, this playing up of ethnic sentiments.
Well, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be hostile, but I mean, if you look at, for example, when President Buhari came to power, I mean, most of the votes he got came from the north. Why do you think that was?
Well, he got from Lagos too.
Yeah,
and Buhari had a tradition, all the time he had contested, he had like about 12 million votes in each of those, and they were always coming from the north, and he never won. So what it tells us is that yes, he was popular in the north, but the north was not enough to make him president of Nigeria.
Okay,
there was an alliance with the southwest or with some other parts of the country before
that
he
gave
won
him the spread.
On the two occasions.
What about beyond that? What about your conflict analysis as this election draws near? Are you seeing more thugs attaching to politicians? Is the level of political violence at significant risk of going up? Because the last time we had the CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, because they do analysis all the time, they were very concerned at the rising number of politically related violent incidents.
No, Charles, it's very, very concerning. There was a report this afternoon that the PDP candidates the convoy was attacked in Borno State.
Although that emerged not to be true, because the Commissioner of Police of Borno State said it was not true.
Okay, mercifully, thank God. We are likely to see more of these. Do not forget that there's insecurity already. The security agencies are practically overwhelmed. They are challenged. They are practically in all states of the federation. So if this is happening and we are having combustions in the political space, they will be taxed further.
Absolutely.
And the ability to deal with that, of course, will be further challenged.
Absolutely.
So, but we are likely to see an increase, really. But maybe that's why we need some more sensitization in the build-up to the election.
Very important.
And the sensitization shouldn't just be coming from the state, from the public agencies alone, INEC,
well, I mean,
government,
a lot of the civil society organizations are doing it as well.
Civil society organizations may not even have enough money because they may not have enough funds. But what about the political parties themselves? They are also stakeholders.
That's a good point.
They have a good role to play in this matrix, Charles.
Okay. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, it's always a pleasure to have you on the program. He is, of course, a public affairs commentator, a Rise News analyst, and head of mass communications at Bayes University in Abuja.